Welcome everybody, this is SharePoint Web Patterns and Practices General SharePoint Development Special Interest Group. That's what the SIG means, and this is the bi-weekly sync. And in these calls, we talk about everything else except the client-side development. So SharePoint Framework and the client-side JavaScript development stuff has its own special interest group with the bi-weekly calls, and then all of that JavaScript development is discussed in those calls. So from there, you can always find the latest on what's happening in SharePoint Framework. Now, you can absolutely ask questions in this call related on anything on SharePoint development, or extensibility would be maybe the better term. But as part of the topics and areas which we cover in the call, in this call, we concentrate on non-JavaScript related topics. So for example, Microsoft Flow, Power Apps integration, information architecture, solution design, Azure integration, Power Apps, CSOM, and all of those things. Now, today we'll do a quick, if my clicker will work. One more second, clicking that one. Yes, it works. So we'll have few news, not humongous amount of news for this week. I'm still catching up after my nice family vacation. Then we'll do a quick recap on the latest on PnP CSOM Core, PnP PowerShell, and modernization tooling. These are our open source initiatives, which are widely adapted and used by our customers and partners to increase their productivity. So we're going to have a look on those and where they're heading and what's the latest around them, just making sure that everybody is up to date on what's happening there. And then after that, we'll have a list formatting tip coming up from Chris Kent. We did agree that I'm not personally aware what Chris is going to show, so I'm crossing fingers that it will be something related on horses. And for those who are not aware what we're talking about, you'll probably see that in Chris's demo. Because when I think of it, if a person joins this call first time and then we start talking about horses in the first 2 minutes, that's pretty weird. But you'll get that context when we get to the Chris's demo. And then after Chris, I think the maturity of today, up to almost 20-30 minutes, depending on how much time Chaks wants to use. He can talk about this stuff for ages, days and days and hours. We're going to talk about the latest on the Microsoft Flow SharePoint connector side. So what has happened there, what are the new features and capabilities which were announced in SPC, but then gradually getting released now during summertime as well. Now, in general, there are different opportunities to participate on the SharePoint community and SharePoint PnP, SharePoint developer community. You can volunteer to do a demo or a solution or a technical pattern in this course. So basically showing some design pattern, a sample or solution, and explaining how did you come up with that, or demonstrating Flow integrations or Azure integration scenarios in the context of SharePoint. All of those would be welcome. It will give you the opportunity to gain visibility if you want to do that. And then all of these videos, all of these demos are getting recorded and they're getting released in YouTube. So if you're looking into, as an example, being an MVP in the future, or let's say getting more visibility for you in the social media, these are great opportunities for that. You can absolutely also contribute in GitHub. So if you find issues in our open source initiatives or code or in documentation, you can easily go to the GitHub, submit a modification or submit a suggestion of change, and then that will be, as long as it's in line on what it's supposed to do, it will be merged with the open source initiatives or code or in the documentation. And this is actually, the GitHub area is growing insanely fast. So it's great to see that people are learning to contribute. And if they find a typo, or if they find an issue in the code, people are willing to contribute for the benefit of others. Because the key point to understand here is that if we share our knowledge, we will be all much more successful as a one team rather than competing between each other. Again, depending on a persona, depending on your own version thinking, is that a good thing or a bad thing? But that's what we want to promote from our side. And the final thing in the slide, please keep on providing us feedback. So don't have a discussion in your home or in your office and complain Microsoft for not understanding things. Let us know. Be vocal. Let us know. Repeat. And don't say that, well, 2 years ago, I actually told you this in SPC corridor, but you haven't fixed that. Please keep on repeating. Be passionate about the topic what you are actually after, and keep on repeating your message. Will definitely fix whatever you are finding if it's a real bug and in line on where we're actually heading. Now, few updates, AKMS SB DevDocs, documentation getting updated on a daily basis. There's actually quite a interesting new migration API documentation there. Official migration API has been evolving during past weeks, and the documentation was just updated yesterday to match those things. So if you're an ISV looking into migrating and migration tooling for SharePoint Online, there are new information available there. AKMS SB Dev videos, now we have 11,500 subscribers already in the channel, and it's growing all the time. During summertime, we released 19 getting started videos. So if you're not really up to date on all of the details and technical things in SharePoint Online, you want to really get started. You want to understand the basics, and there's now 19 new videos available around different SharePoint development topics, which is not just about SharePoint development, because there's, as an example, how the modern theming works in a SharePoint Online, or how the site design works in a SharePoint Online, which somebody might say that that's not development, and maybe it's not development, but it's extensibility. It's changing the SharePoint Online, matching to your business requirements. And all of those stuff is getting covered in this course and in the YouTube channel as well. And then AKMS SB Dev issues, really important thing. If you run into any issues, please report them using the AKMS SB Dev issue list, so that the other ones in the community will be aware on your finding. And then we have one location where we as a Microsoft can go and update the situation and keep you up to date on what's happening. There's quite a few issues. Well, that sounds bad. There has been few occasions where there has been cases where you are using the issue list, we've been able to identify an issue early on and then reduce the scale and impact of the issue. So thank you everybody who's been really active on the GitHub around these things as well. Super valuable for everybody in the community. One reminder on the next call. So the next community call is actually already next Tuesday. This is our monthly community call. So we do have a different kind of agendas in these calls. In these Thursday calls, we try to keep the introductions relatively short, and then always do more demos, up to 2 to 3 demos in community call. In the monthly community call, we want to actually get more of the PMs, program managers from the SharePoint engineering and SharePoint feature owners to the place and talk about what's happening, and then also have community demos. So next Tuesday, we will do a user voice status for SharePoint Dev. We'll talk about all of the acknowledgements, contributions which community has done within the past month, changes in the samples, all of that stuff. Julie is going to do a great demo around exporting. Oh, and I haven't updated that status. How did I? That title is completely wrong. So let me actually, I can't fix that right away. So let me get this one in here, which is completely fine. It's not exporting and importing modern pages, cross sites, and tenants with PnP tools. It is actually how to build a real solution in SharePoint Online using SharePoint framework. So it's a really nice story around architecture of a larger solution, and which is actually being used on a day-to-day basis by numerous customers. And then after that, me and Luca Pandinelli is one of the PMs owning SharePoint framework. We're going to talk about SharePoint framework and the next steps and the recent evolvement on that one. So what's going to happen? What is the areas where we're going to concentrate, and so on. So that's on next Tuesday. Sorry about the title thing. Julie, if you're on the call, my bad. Definitely, I'll fix that for the social media post. Now, quick updates on the open source projects. So PnP CSOM Core library, we did release a version on the 29th of July. Not a massive version, because a lot of the open source project leads have been having also summer vacations and spending time with their family, which is a really important thing as well. So, but there was a new version out in 29th of July, which has some additional fixes and improvements, for example, in the ALM API calls, which is increasing the default timeouts and adjustments on the handling of the automation. Not a massive release, like I said, you can expect much more significant releases in the future. Now, on the PnP PowerShell side of the house, there's quite a few actually. There's a few additional adjustments, but again here as well, mainly documentation updates and some setting changes in here. Not a massive amount of new capabilities. One thing what I actually didn't note on the CSOM Core, but I can note it in here. The usage of these open source initiatives is growing quite fast. So you can actually, in the case of PnP PowerShell especially, you can see that chart actually skyrocketing and multiplying its usage on every single, every single 6 months or something like that. So right now, 12,000 tenants in every single month are using PnP PowerShell, which is really interesting. Now, I cannot actually disclose the exact details on the SharePoint Online PowerShell usage, but in the future, we're looking into potentially aligning these two things, so SharePoint Online PowerShell and PnP PowerShell, because it does just make sense to have a one common tool that people can use, which is being supported, but then being built together with community. More on that one whenever we get our story clarified. Now, on modernization tooling, quickly on that side as well. So there was actually really cool development here. I want to just recap what these things are. So the modernization tooling will help you to transform classic SharePoint content, classic SharePoint pages to a modern experience in place. That's one option. And then the second option is that you can even do cross-site collection transformation, either in SharePoint Online or from on-premises to SharePoint Online. And that's a really, really cool capability. So if you have a publishing site in on-premises and you want to transform that to be a communication site, and this modernization tooling can help you to do that. And there's quite a few videos available around this one. So if you are in progress of having this kind of a project where you need to think through how do you transform your classic publishing to modern communication sites, which is definitely the recommended direction, please have a look on this tooling. It is getting evolved all the time, and really cool development from Paul Bullock recently in the 1908 release. There's now even support for SharePoint 2010 classic publishing to SharePoint Online transformation. So basically, it is the tooling is using the classic web services in SharePoint 2010 to analyze what kind of content there is in a classic publishing sites, and then creating modern sites on the top side. It's really, really, really insanely cool stuff.
Reza, before you move, I want to announce one thing here. I hope people know about this. We are also starting to support providing inventory of SharePoint Workflows 2010, 2013, as well as InfoPath forms, whether those forms are in the client or web-based forms.
Yes.
So we are going to help customers there as well in terms of understanding what is required, especially with workflows to flow, kind of provide an upgradability score. But we have just started to scratch the surface. It's in beta version. If you do want to try it out and let us know, because I think that is going to, we have lots of plans there, but we do want to get your feedback as well in that.
Yeah. And the number one thing on what Chaks was saying is really understanding what you have. And that's the modernization scanner. And that's going to then support the classic workflow and InfoPath usage analyzing and scoring. Is it can you transform that to the Microsoft Flow and all of that? So please test this out and give us feedback. What will help you to make the transition? If it's also a missing capability in the modern communication sites, please let us know so we're able to address those gaps as well. Good. That's about the modernization tooling, and that was a relatively quick recap, and not too bad, actually 14 minutes, so I wasn't actually having a too long monologue in the start. So now I think, Chris, it's your turn. Are you in the house?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Chris is in the house and we can hear you. Now, if we can also get the screen sharing work, that's really cool.
Well, so many things.
Oh, I can see that. That was fast. Right. Do we have horses before you start? Do we have horses?
I would never do horses. Right? Appropriate, it's unprofessional. All right, but maybe. So you guys know me. I'm Chris. All right, there we go. So I want to talk about list formatting. A couple of different things with it. So we're not going to talk about the kind of internals of formatting today. I want to talk about a couple of changes to some of the list experiences that affect formatting to make it even more powerful. So let's head over to our classic Warrior Horses site. All right, we've seen this a number of times. All right, if we go over to like our agents list over here, we'll take a look. We have our formats all kind of aligned on here. We've got a field, customizer here, and that's cool. All that works great. But now in targeted release, if we hit quick edit, we can actually see those formats are applying directly within the quick edit, which is really, really awesome. So you'll notice even my row formatter with the row class starts happening here. So I click in here, I can actually edit these things. When I hit to edit, you can see the format is removed, and I have my kind of classic editing experience here. So I can uncheck a couple of things, but as soon as I click off of that, there's my updated changes here. All right, so that's really, really powerful. It's super awesome. There are a couple of limitations with it, right? Number one being that field customizers obviously aren't supported in the quick edit mode, but the formatting, column formatting, and row formatters that are row class are fully supported. If we look at a row formatter or a view format that is a full-on row formatter where we've got the whole thing, right, and we hit quick edit, we can actually be relieved that this does not try and draw it all in that way and try and figure out where on earth I should click for various things. Okay? All right, so that's one thing. That's really, really cool. But there's also some other stuff you guys may or may not have seen, which is this idea here. If I go over to our hipster stuff site, right, and I hit this new, and I go new list, I get this thing we've seen forever. Boring. But good news, we hit site contents here. I have no idea why these experiences are different, but they are. But if I go to site contents and I hit new, I go new list, we see I get this whole fancy create a list experience, right? If you guys haven't seen this, this is really awesome. And this is both in standard release and target release, except for this from Excel. I think that's just targeted release right now. But I choose this from existing list, and I can come in here, and we give this a second here while it loads up my sites. All right, and I come down here, and I can actually grab from my Warrior Horses site any of these lists. All right, so say I want to grab kind of our classic things list here. I'm going to grab that. I'm going to call that hipster things because, you know, that sounds great. So we'll create that. And you notice it automatically moves everything over. I've got all my columns here. And if I hit this a new one, right, I'm just going to do a thing, right? We'll say the progress is 54% and it's assigned to myself, right? And we'll just kind of leave it there. We'll uncheck that and we'll hit save. All right, you'll notice all my formats came over, no problem, right? So we got the fancy gauge we showed off in the last call, right? We got our face pile, our checkboxes, everything came over with it. So all our formats, hugely powerful. So now your formats work all across the board, right? We even get all our views over here. So when I do things like my alternating view, right, I've only got one item, but you'll notice because I use the theme classes, right, it matches the hipster stuff theme rather than the Warrior Horses site theme here. So you can see now there's even more and more power to all of this. A couple of strange things to note right now is that you'll notice titles here and completes over here. When I copied it, the order changed. Or it didn't change. It changed before. That's great. Ignore what I said. But a couple other things here is, it's because I'm on my all items view. There it is. You notice there it's swapped in the default view. A couple other strange things is, although if I click this and I go to flow, I don't have any flows set up for this list, right? I just created this list, but you'll notice my flow button did come over. If I click that, and I wouldn't rely on this because it seems a little strange. If I click that, I can actually still launch that flow from my other site. And if I run it, it actually does work with this list item. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but it's interesting. The main point is that all my formats came over. Now, if I come back to my site contents, I want to try one more thing here. If I go to new and I create a new list, all right, we go back to this experience from an existing list. Now, this time I'm going to grab that agents list we were looking at before. So select my Warrior Horses site, agents. We'll also call it agents because hipsters also need agents. Notice here I've got some additional lists and fields. That's because I've got a site column. It's actually that reorder column that has that field customizer SharePoint framework extension associated with it. And I grab that. And then, of course, we need to add a couple of items here. So let's add Billy Son. That sounds like a great name. All right, we'll say +1, blah, blah, blah. That's his phone number. And we'll just grab a picture right here so we can just have that. Okay, sounds great. So we save that. All right, notice all those formats are coming over. Let's create just one more so we can see things in action, right? So we'll call this old man. I should really think about these ahead of time. All right, grab that, and we'll say our phone number is +1, blah, 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 blah. That's good. Grab this guy. Boom. And we're going to save that. So now we've got these things here. So all our formats came over, but you'll notice something really interesting is that our field customizer also came over, right? So this is our reorder field customizer. All that came over. That was not activated on this site, that custom action. But because I had tenant deployment on that extension, it appears to have come over, which is awesome news. So really, really cool stuff. As you can see, making your formats far more useful across your entire tenant with some of these new experiences across your quick edit and across everything else. So it's perfect time to get far more involved in creating these things. So to summarize, with formatting quick edit, your column format's fully supported. When you click on it, you're going to go back to your standard edit interface. Row formats are partially supported, right? So your row class formats are going to work great. One thing to note that if you've got a color across that entire bar, when you edit an item, it seems to be putting kind of a blue shade, regardless of your theme for whatever reason, on there to kind of mark that. It's not a big deal, but just something to note. That's not anything you're doing wrong. That's just part of the quick edit experience. And again, only in targeted release for now. So if you log into your standard tenant and it's not there, don't cry. It'll come soon. And then the new list creation experience, right? This is just from the site contents for now. I imagine that will move also to the main page. But it's copying all your formats. The field view customizer extensions are coming along, but list view command sets are not, at least as far as I could see from my kind of limited testing on that. But all of this is available in standard release. And finally, check out the full documentation on column formatting, view formatting, because again, this is the perfect time to get involved in some of that. We've got a ton of samples available for you here at this link with the list formatting samples. We've got I think we've got 60 plus samples at this point. Show you to do everything I showed here today, plus a bunch more stuff. And if you want to read more about what happened with the quick edit experience, check this out right here. All right, that's all I got for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Just a few additional kind of points on the column formatting. Column formatting page, by the way, is the #1 most viewed SharePoint developer documentation page. So every single month, it's been like that for past 6 months. So clearly, Chris's demos are causing a lot of attention on this one, and people are eagerly want to test the things. But please go to the GitHub. I think there's how many samples GitHub has? Like 50?
Like 62 at this point.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, which is really good. Now, one thing to notice on the column formatting also is that it partially works. Column formatting partially works in SharePoint 2019, but then SharePoint Online always has the latest and greatest capabilities, because SharePoint 2019 is quite an old version already, even though it's currently 2019, but it was actually created from SharePoint Online a while back, and SharePoint Online is getting the new and latest and greatest capabilities every single week. So it's always evolving much faster. But thank you, Chris, for this demo. I think it's easier, Chaks, to jump directly on your screen and then start having a look on the Microsoft Flow integration stories and improvements in SharePoint.
So yeah, I think we took a break for a month, and a lot of things happened with respect to Flow and SharePoint connector. So I wanted to go through some of the updates. These are not surprising updates. We have been talking about these since SPC, the SharePoint Conference North America. So let me go through some of the updates that we released. First, the improvements to Flow authoring. One of the most asked feature, ability to copy and paste actions in your flow, because you're going to do something repeatedly, even in a flow that is supposed to do some repetitive actions, right? That's what we built. So you got support for copy and paste actions now. It should be available in your flow portal in the designer, so you can easily copy and paste. I can show you a demo. And then there was this weird behavior where if you were using an output or something, an input as well from another action or trigger, you are not able to delete or rename that action, right? It would say that this is being used in other steps. So that is being solved. You can go delete or rename actions on which the other steps depend. But if you want to make sure that things are working properly, the flow checker has been updated to ensure that it can find and report issues on such dependencies. So another cool update. We do this all the time. So great to see the clipboard support, and even deleting and renaming the actions is now possible. So with that, I'm going to specific new SharePoint actions. So the first one we released is working with folders. So you can now create folders in a document library. Previously, you had to use create file, do some hack, and sort of create the folder along with a dummy file and then go back and delete. We heard you guys loud and clear. We wanted this to be really simple. So we have the create folder action in the Flow SharePoint connector now. Check-in, check-out, another one of the key scenarios that happens in document projects. So we're happy to announce that we have checkout, check-in, and discard checkout actions available as well. Moving along, we have working with permissions. So SharePoint, modern SharePoint supports a set of permissions, and you can go through the UX through grant access and provide access to a file, an item, or the list itself in SharePoint. So basically, the exact same thing now has been brought over to Flow, so you can actually grant access to an item or folder to specific people, or basically you can say, stop sharing this, which basically means that it removes everything and just keeps the sharing to the owner. So this only supports today to specific people. We are planning to see how we can expand more, talking with the sharing folks to understand what implications are here. Modern document sets, that's also another feature that everybody we're expecting it should be 100% rolled out, at least for the document sets that do not have custom homepage configured. So if you do have a modern document set, some of the things that are already available in the Flow and SharePoint connector should work with that. So when a file is created in a folder, here replace folder as the document set, you can pick that actually in the picker. Same for when a file is created or modified, and for a selected file, get item, request sign off, set a reminder flow. Everything should work with for the files inside the document set, as well as if you actually have other triggers for specific files. So go try out those and let us know if something you see is not properly working, or it's something not properly wired up as well. But more stuff is coming up with documents that we are planning to see to create a document set action available in Flow. We haven't started working on that yet, but it's in my backlog to go and tackle that as next action. So along with these, we also needed to support some of the properties coming out of get item and get file, right? So if you do get file, we wanted to let you know the checkout status. So you would now get is checked out, whether the file is checked out or not. You also get a version number so that you can see which version number you are currently in. And we also checked in the check out by property. I don't see it yet. I probably think it's rolling out, but that also will give you who it is checked out by if it is checked out, right? So really cool options to use in your business process to find out what is happening with the file. And finally, this was long overdue, content approval status and approval comments also now flow through the get file and get item. So finally, you can say, hey, get the file. Is this file, what's the status? Is it draft? Is it pending? Is it approved or rejected? So those are now supported in the action properties as action output properties as well. So if you were using send HTTP request and Mikhail Svensson's hack of how do you get moderation status, you can now get those out and then use these out of the box connector outputs to go figure out what's the content approval status of a file or a document right away in your Flow. I'll jump to demo and then come here. So lots of things to demo, but I decided on showing something around grant permission, grant access. Can you see all my 3 browser windows?
Not confirming. Okay.
Complicated demo involving 3 users, but I think it's going to be worth it. So if you see, here is the user 1 who has access to everything in this projects list. Here's second user, user 2, who is going to be submitting projects, and then user 3, who's only going to see the projects that are approved. So you can already see the list has been configured in a way that, hey, only specific items are visible, or there is already some logic that we do. You can do that today by going to the list settings. And then in the advanced settings, you have item level permissions to start with. So read access, who can read, and then create an edit access and things like that. So you can start from a baseline of how you want this to work. So as I'm the owner of the site, I'm able to see every operations that are going on here, right? Even I can create some, and I can see John Doe has also created some. So I already have some things here by John Doe created project 2, which is pending. So I want to send an approval. An approval is going to go to this user, Chaks. And then basically once Chaks approves, you should be able to see some magic happen, right? So let me go change the project 2 to get approved. So obviously I have a flow. So I'm going to go to flow. I'm going to see my approved project. And it's going to open up the approved project flow here in a second. Really simple flow, nothing more to add, run the flow. So that started the flow. And now in a second, I should get an approval request in Teams. There you go. So requested by John Doe, and here's the project link. And I can approve or reject. So I'm going to approve, submit. And now what's going to happen is that if you notice, the pending should change to approved if the automatic update works, or we can actually refresh. But you saw project 2 now appeared for this user 3, right? And as an owner, if I go and look at the project 2, you can see in the manage access, I have removed everything and have access only to the user that created it, who's John Doe, and the user that I do want this approved project to be visible to, so Karan, right? So I was able to do this in the flow. So let's look at what the flow is doing here. So the flow is going and basically using the for a selected item, and then I'm getting the item. And here you can see I'm checking the content approval status. So you can see right now there is a bug here where it actually shows a description as well for the comments associated with the content approval. It should just be content approval comments. We'll probably fix that soon. But there's also content approval status. And it clearly gives you the documentation. It can be one of the following: draft, pending, approved, or rejected. So I'm using that property to see if it's equal to pending. So I'm ensuring that this flow does not run for approved documents. And if it is approved or something else that's not pending, I can handle my logic in the steps here. So if it is pending, I'm going to create an approval. This is the new approval available in Flow. And then what it does is it creates the approval, but it does not send any notification. So I can even go and say enable notifications, which by default only sends to email, to not be available, right? So I'm going to disable that option. And then I'm going to post an adaptive card as the flow bot to a user in Teams. So then I choose the user, who's going to be the owner property from this metadata in my list. And then I'm going to get the adaptive card from this create an approval action, which is pretty clever, right? So you want an adaptive card. Adaptive card is used across the platform. So we are able to now get the actual adaptive card JSON from the create an approval. So we can pass it along to the flow bot that knows how to respond to those adaptive cards. So that is being passed. And then I wait for approval, right? So then I go into a waiting state. So now what happened you saw here was I got approve and reject, right, in my Teams. So that basically enables me to now approve this right here in my Teams. And if you're using Teams on the go, you can see all of your approvals here. Much, much, much better than email, right? And once I approve, the Flowbot knows how to handle this request. So it approves behind the scenes the actual request. Your flow will now continue. And now I go and check if the outcome is approved. I'm going to basically set content approval status to approve, right? My job is done here. I'm going to approve that. But now I can go change some internal things for that item. I can actually now remove everybody, right? So I can stop sharing this item. So all I say is what's the library, what's the site, and what's the item ID I'm operating on. And once I've removed this, only the owners will have access. And then I go and add the user that basically initiated this flow and the person that I really want to have access. In this case, Karam, and the user email who's coming from the user that triggered the flow. So it's as simple as that. You select the site, the list or library, and then ID. And again, if you notice some of the things you're seeing here, we're trying to formulate and have sort of similar actions. So you see list or library name. So we have, we didn't create two actions like grant access to an item and then grant access to a file. So we basically have grant access to an item, which refers to a list item or a file or a folder, right? And you'll get all of those in the list here. And then roles, we have can edit and can view. And then you can say any message, and then you can actually notify. So notify will actually trigger the SharePoint email that you get in the SharePoint UX. So that's how this works. And if you want to map this to the actual user experience, remember, flow is for end users. So we basically build this similar to how end user operations work in SharePoint. If you hadn't used flow and if you had to do this manually, right, you would have gone to basically, you'd have gone here, selected the item, you could have approve, reject, could have used this modern approve, reject panel here to change it to approved. And then you would have gone to either through the manage access or in the info pane, you got manage access, right? In here, you have two options. You can use sharing links. We already have created a sharing link action in Flow that basically does not change the underlying permission or object, the user options, but it just creates a sharing link, which is very efficient as well. Or you can manage the direct access, which basically changes the permission model behind the scenes. Now you are breaking inheritance and all those complex things that we were very familiar in the old days of SharePoint and how we do it. It still happens behind the scenes, but it's much more managed at the sharing object level rather than at a basic SharePoint level. So it works across and syncs across groups, for example, and other workloads that we have. And if you see grant access is right there, this is exactly what the action is doing. Enter the name. It's like selecting a site, selecting the list, entering the recipients, what are the roles, what is the message, and do we have to notify people, right? This is basically what the action is doing today. So we basically mimic this exact user flow to also have it in our flow designer. So that's how the grant access permission work. Of course, I think here, if you see, you do get kind of like my team members and my team owners. This is something we're trying to work with Flow team to understand how we get more than just people to also have these sort of, members group, and especially we're working in Office 365 groups, how do you bring that forward? So that's something I would say it's a limitation right now, but we can, we are looking into how we go solve this problem. But first step, release the action, have it working with basic scenarios of having it assigning to people. So that's the grant access demo. And to quickly show you one of the cool things I like in create folder. So if you search for create folder, you'll get create new folder. We support creating recursive folders. So you have the documentation right there, folder 1/folder 2. So you can just create, simply folder 1/folder 2, folder 3. SharePoint will figure out which one is missing, which one needs to be created along this recursive pattern and create the folders accordingly. So yeah, pretty cool functions. I think these are some really important steps in your business process. And by the way, all of these we took from the Flow Ideas Forum, which is a Flow user-wise forum. So we went ahead and said, what is missing? Of course, we can go, make a one-to-one mapping to say, SharePoint Designer, here's the actions. Flow, oh yeah, we don't miss some actions. But you also wanted to go in and check what our customers are complaining about or what other feedback they're submitting. And these actions we hear every time, whether it's in the user-wise forum or if it's a customer call that we go talk to, or if it's a SharePoint conference or Ignite, every time we hear these. So to Vesa's point, please do keep giving us feedback. It's very, very important. Yeah, sometimes product development is hard. Trust me, it is not magic. It's not going to just come up literally in a month. So it's going to take time. But unless we know where to start and what things to start with, that time just gets bigger and bigger. So please keep giving us feedback. Submit the Flow Ideas in the Flow Ideas Forum, where you got much bigger audience, not just SharePoint, to also provide feedback on even the Flow Designer stuff and even SharePoint stuff. So with that, I've been presenting a lot on every other Thursday. Seems like I've been like cannibalizing the entire makers topic. So if you do have some interesting topics to present, let us know. Reach out to us. You guys know how to reach out to us and where to reach out to us. So I do want to collect topics for the next few calls, so that I'm not the center stage, and I want the community to show us awesome stuff being built with SharePoint Flow Power Apps. So if you do have some topics, do let us know. And that's it today from me. I'll look at the chat as well for any questions.
Thank you, Chaks. Thank you. I'll move back on my slide so we can actually have an open Q&A discussion on my screen. And then if there's something which is needed, I can do ad hoc demos as well, if I can just find the right screen. There we go. So getting that one visible. Thank you, Chaks. Thank you, Chris, for the great discussion. Now, there was one discussion point which we touched on the chat. The chat is nice to see that chat is still active and really active, almost as active as it was in a Skype for Business during this course. Is that the starter kit discussion? Obviously, it is slightly off the topic of these two things which we went through today, but actually let me do this. Let me take here one browser and let me recap some of the things. So first of all, the Flow Ideas Forum is available in here. Chaks mentioned that. So basically providing input on what's needed, and then engineering is closely watching up on this and then making a decision based on those based on the input in the Flow Ideas Forum. Is this the primary location for Flow, Chaks, or is there a separate user voice for Flow as well?
No, this is the user voice for Flow, and similarly, there is in the same place. I think if you go to Power Apps, has a very similar thing with Purple branding and Power Apps branding. Yeah.
Cool. And obviously, SharePoint is one of the biggest users of Flow from and Power Apps. So that's why we want to actually talk about Power Apps and Flow in this course as well, because it is definitely one way of extending SharePoint capabilities. Now, the second thing what I wanted to quickly pinpoint, coming back on Chris's demo. So if you search for column formatting, GitHub as an example, there is a massive set of SharePoint GitHub, column formatting and view formatting definitions in here. So if you go to the GitHub, you go to the view samples, all of these are individual demos. And some of these are really, really, really great demos. So as an example, we have used some of these things in the keynotes in the SharePoint conference or in Ignite, and that's how we then created them. And obviously, we want everybody to have access on the similar demos as what we have and what we use, so you can actually demonstrate and use the capability as it was shown for you in our conferences. And using the this is really as easy as reading the summary, reading what do you need and what kind of columns is needed. So in this case, this does require, for example, quite specific set of columns to be able to get really cool looking contact list. And then you create the list, you create the columns, and then after that, you take the JSON, which is available from here. You can just copy that from here, which is definitely one solution, one way of making things happen. And we are all the time getting new contributions here as well. So Chris is really leading the column formatting or list formatting samples. So all the time new stuff is coming in here as well. So, and Chris is adding all of his demos here as well. So really easy way of building really cool looking lists and experiences. And also one thing to notice that obviously, if you would be using Microsoft Teams, we're using Microsoft Teams heavily in Microsoft as well. You can absolutely expose those teams, those lists as a tab in the Microsoft Teams. So that's one way, and together with creation and editing capabilities. So that's one way of really building a simple application or a solution to track something or progress or track something else, and then surface that in a Microsoft Teams as a tab. And the information could be then updated using Flow or whatever is your preferred option. Now, the one thing which we I'm just answering questions which are coming in at the same time. Is JSON an important language to learn for creating creative SharePoint design? Yes. So JSON itself is just a definition on how you define and key and a value. So if I zoom in, how do you define a key and the value? Then how applications or solutions, or in this case SharePoint, uses JSON, that's always slightly different depending on the use case. So in the case of column formatting or list formatting, these things are basically SharePoint's implementation on how to define style and how to define these attributes. It is definitely worthwhile on getting know this. Now, if you
and one more thing, Lisa, to add to that point, JSON is important language. But one of the things SharePoint is moving, and that's how product development is done, is we are finding all of the scenarios, common scenarios from these formatting scenarios and making it available in the UX. So if you feel like there is something that you see that is really repetitive in JSON that you really, really like, let us know, because that will feed to the team that actually is building everything in the UX. And I think we should show that as a demo one day, Vesa, probably, of the full. I think we showed it in SPCNA, but you can basically do this, and Microsoft uses the same JSON formatting, exactly how you guys use it to do in the UX.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you're looking into more details around the column formatting, this is the official documentation. Chris Kent has done quite a few demos already on this one. So if you go SP Dev videos, or actually much more easier way to remember is YouTube/SharePoint PnP. That is our SharePoint Patterns and Practices YouTube channel. And there's quite a few demos from Chris from here around the column formatting. So you can actually find those using the playlists. And there you can actually find the column formatting demos. Where are they? Where we are adding all the time, then also the new demos which Chris is doing. So there's quite a few demos available and examples available how these things actually work. Good, and this is absolutely a great resource. Absolutely agree on that. Now, there was a few other questions around this topics. First of all, any news on will SharePoint conference session videos will be going? When will those be available? Unfortunately, I do not know. I was just yesterday actually wondering exactly the same question. Where and when will be the SPC19 session videos available? Unfortunately, due to whatever reasons, that has not yet happened. Now, then there was a comment around SharePoint frameworks. For SharePoint framework for on-premises would be great for SharePoint 2019. Now, let's be clear, SharePoint 2019 does support SharePoint framework, but it supports a specific version. So if we have a look on SharePoint PnP 2019 development, and even my name there, we can easily find what I'm actually looking for. So I recorded quite recently an updated version of the Getting Started with SharePoint Framework Solution Development for SharePoint 2019, which actually walks through the whole process for SharePoint 2019. What is the versions? What is being supported? What do you need to do in SharePoint 2019 farm to make these things actually work? Because you need to enable the app URL and those capabilities. So it is a quite nice video to be used as a reference, because it actually does walk through the farm requirements, and also it does we create actually the SharePoint Framework solution together. It is 16 minutes, so slightly too long. On my objective was like 5 to 10 minutes, but hey, I talk too much always, so no can do. Really important thing to realize. Now, about that topic, though, the SharePoint Framework 2019, SharePoint 2019 supports SharePoint Framework 1.4.1, and there was a question from Catherine related on are we looking into upgrading that. I think Catherine, you sent me the question in Twitter at some point as well, but I missed answering on that one, or somewhere else, because I remembered that being happening. Now, we are not looking into updating SharePoint Framework version for SharePoint 2019, and really the big reason for that one is that if we would do that, then we would have to re-upgrade all of the modern capabilities and the out-of-the-box capabilities in SharePoint as well. So it's a massive, massive investment. So it's not just about the extensibility. It would actually mean that we would have to do end-to-end testing and verification and upgrading all of the out-of-the-box capabilities. And that's why updating SharePoint Framework supported version in SharePoint 2019 is not as simple as it might first seem. So we're not looking to make that happen. Now, whenever there will be a new version for on-premises, maybe potentially there will be, I don't know, haven't been confirmed, and then there will be probably a new moment of a time when the latest version potentially will be used for a while and potentially not. One thing though to remember is that in on-premises there are capabilities in SharePoint Online which are never going to be available in on-premises. So SharePoint Online is always the first, greatest and most up-to-date capability, which has everything what you have in on-premises available in 2019 plus so much more. And then on-premises versions are being forked out of the SharePoint Online code. That's how it actually works. Every single week you get a new version of SharePoint in SharePoint Online, if you are not aware of that, which is, by the way, super cool. Now, I'm trying to follow up on the discussion as well. That's good. Thank you for answering on these things as well. Now, one thing what I wanted to, we chatted during the demos as well, is the SharePoint Starter Kit, which is quite a useful tool for showing what's possible with the modern capabilities of SharePoint. We first initially released SharePoint Starter Kit back in SharePoint Conference 2018, and we've been evolving that gradually after that. Now, I've been tempted to actually start reorganizing and redesigning the structure, because more and more people are asking that it would be great if those web parts which would work in SharePoint 2019 would be available for 2019. Right now, the Starter Kit is using 1.8.2 version of SharePoint Framework, which means that it doesn't work in a SharePoint 2019. But the solution would be to actually redesign this, potentially even split all of the web parts to an individual solution. So you would be able to take the web parts one by one into a use, and then have a dedicated solutions which only works in a SharePoint Online and those which work in a SharePoint on-premises. And that would probably be the most useful scenario, because it actually contains quite a lot of interesting web parts. Some of the web parts are nowadays available also out of the box, but there are still scenarios which these web parts can actually do. If you're a developer, if you're looking into implementing stuff in SharePoint Framework, this is also one of the key objectives of this one, is really also to provide you sample code. So all of the SharePoint Starter Kit web part code and everything else is available in the GitHub. So everything is open source, so we're able to actually use that. Now, and based on the discussion on the chat during when I was talking about this one, I think it's a worthwhile of starting redesigning this architecture. And most likely what the right solution is, that will actually split this to be in quite a few multiple different solutions. So in that case, you can actually take any of these web parts individually and install to your tenant or install to your SharePoint 2019 environment, as long as it's using the right version, or nothing which would not block it to be used in on-premises. you would be able to take that into use. So tempted to do that, and definitely we'll get to that one because SharePoint 2019 demand is clearly there. So thank you for having that discussion. Good. And thank you, David, for confirming my assumption on that one as well. Any updates on using SharePoint Framework to customize modern SharePoint forms? I saw a user voice had changed to looking at it. Yes, I updated to user voice, I think yesterday or day. No, actually that one quite well, not recently, but anyway. And let me show you that location as well. So if we go to the sharepoint.uservoice.com, we can actually see the SharePoint user voice location. This is where we actually collect feedback for features. So no bugs, don't report any bugs using user voice. User voice is really for feature enhancements and capabilities which are missing. I'll briefly zoom this so you can actually more easily see what is available. Now, number one requested user voice entry is the taxonomy store, but number three is actually allow us to develop custom modern forms with the custom editing experience. So this is now number three in the dev list, and we're looking into that. Actually, it is the person who's actively now looking into this one as well is in the call. So we definitely are looking into that, but no news at this point, and we'll keep on updating user voice immediately when there's any updates around this one. And please keep on voting on user voice as well. One thing, but by the way, we're going to talk about user voice obviously in the monthly community call because we always have a dedicated section there as well. But just a recap on the user voice, we did free up quite a lot of votes on the CSOM requirements, and there was quite a few old CSOM requests in the user voice, which we actually closed back in June because we're really looking into providing all the new API capabilities using then Microsoft Graph rather than CSOM, so it is more in line with the direction where we're heading as a company, and that's why we wanted to actually just give a statement. Basically, if we know that we're not going to invest on those CSOM requests which were available, we close them so people explicitly know that we're not looking into making that happen. As an example, taxonomy API is actively being developed, and we do apologize on the delay on that one, but it will be available in the Microsoft Graph sooner or later. I can't give you an exact status, and this is like the 26th time I'm mentioning this, but it is getting worked on, which is a super important thing. On the Carrie's comment related on this request, as an example, allow us to develop custom modern forms with the custom editing experience. This is the reason why it jumped quite significantly, is that we combine also user voice issues or submissions and ideas. So if two ideas are pretty close to each other, there's no point having two competing ideas on the same topic. We rather combine them as one and then combine the votes as well, because that helps on them prioritizing our internal engineering processes as well. Good. I think that's about it for now. That was kind of the Q&A section, kind of an ad hoc demos Q&A section in the end. By the way, just out of curiosity, if you think that this is always valuable in the end of this course to have at least 10 minutes of random chit-chatting and random ad hoc demos, please do let us know as well. So we need to definitely start allocating more strictly time on that one. But I think we still have more than 60 or 70 people in the call, so clearly this is interesting for everybody. It's always timing decision, what is important and what do we keep on the calls and whatnot. But thank you everybody for joining. So thank you Chris for the great demo and updates on the list formatting, and thank you Chaks on the updates on the flow integration area. Next week we will have SharePoint Framework special intro. Actually, we'll have first a monthly community call on Tuesday, where we will have Julie Turner doing a really cool demo around the real-life solution design, and then me and Luca are talking about the future of SharePoint Framework. And then on Thursday next week, we'll have a SharePoint Framework special interest group call where we have two different specific demos coming up as well. On the SharePoint Framework side, quick update as well. We were forced to pull SharePoint Framework 1.9 out of the NPM at some point. The 1.9.1 is currently being tested. tested. I will actually continue testing that right after this call. So we're looking into getting that live out quite soon. So hopefully by next week, we'll definitely have some updates on that. But thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you, everybody, for being active on the chat window. Super important part of this engagement as well. Let's stay in touch in social media, and please do let us know if we can improve these processes or you have other ideas for our community. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Great call. Enjoyed that.